Well, good morning and welcome to our healthy communities. This morning we have Dr. Kirk with us again. Dr. Kirk, how you been?
I've been fantastic. Thanks, Bob.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming back to teach us something else today. Today we're learning about hormones.
Got to have them, hormones and menopause.
And menopause. So they're not our hormones, they're lady hormones.
Well, actually, we have them too.
I know we do.
We go through menopause. I'm sure if you ask any woman over the age of 50, they know it. We go through menopause.
Is that where we buy the Corvette?
Among other things, yes.
Okay. All right. I did not know that. We really do. Is there a menopause? There really?
There probably is, but it's much more subtle. We probably should talk about that someday.
Someday, yeah, we'll have man talk one morning.
You know, I think that's a good idea.
It would be good. The men need to know about their hormones too. But this morning we're going to focus on menopause.
We're going to talk about the hormone replacement therapy studies and all of the confusion that has presented itself since 2002. When the WHI, or the Women's Health Initiative, came out. In 2002, there was a massive, what we call landmark study, very high-quality study, 16,000 women in one group, 10,000 in the other, and it basically changed the face of hormone replacement. It kind of put us into a tailspin. In 2002, when they came out with a preliminary result that using hormone replacement, particularly estrogen and progesterone, which is what wanes after the age of, say, 51, which is the average age of menopause. Mm-hmm. It starts to wane a few years before then, and then women begin to have symptoms in most cases. About 80% of women probably in this country have symptoms of hot flashes. That's probably the most common thing that we experience, or that women experience.
Well, we experience it.
We do. It's true. Very indirectly, but it's...
Indirectly.
It's a challenge at times for all of us. When that happens, the classic history was to put them on hormone replacement. And what that involved was estrogen, progesterone, and sometimes testosterone. And those are the sex hormones. So at the end of the day, when this study came out, it said that women who took estrogen and progesterone, a specific type called Premarin and Prempro, which is made by one company, the result was that they had an increased risk of cancer of the breast.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, not good. And an increased risk of heart disease. Now, interestingly, when you look at women at the age of 45 and you look at men at the age of 45, men have significantly more heart disease than women. And that's true for many, many years until they get into the menopause years. When they're not on hormone replacement, we were finding that women had the same amount or even more heart disease than men. So we used to believe that hormone replacement would help women not achieve heart disease.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that we justified giving it to them. But this particular study actually found the opposite. However, that was where the challenges began. The study itself, though very quality in its approach, was not representative of the women who actually take hormone replacement. In other words, the average age of women in that large study was 63. And the average age of menopause is 51. So if you're having symptoms and you're going to go on hormones and you're going to do that at 51, is that the same thing to say that your risk of heart disease and breast cancer at 51 on hormones is the same as at 63? Probably not. And that's really where we come full circle to today. We're going to talk about the consensus statement for 2013. Came out last week.
Ooh.
Yeah, or maybe a week and a half ago now. It was a representation of 7 international groups and societies that specialize in women's health and hormones, including the North American Menopause Society. And what it found was, or what they determined was appropriate based on all of the studies that have been done since then and some before, and even looking at that study in more detail, they found that women who continued hormone replacement at the timing of menopause actually lived longer, lived healthier, and it is their recommendation that women should consider either continuing on hormones or starting hormones sometime in that first 10 years after menopause starts. So if we use that 50 or 51 as the average age of menopause.
That it begins.
That's correct.
Okay.
Starting then sometime at the before the age of 60 is an appropriate thing to consider. Doing it at a time where the opportunity for cardiac disease and vascular or endothelial dysfunction. Endothelium is the lining of the blood vessels that are throughout the body. They get cholesterol plaques placed into them, and that process happens inevitably over time for both men and women, but it seems to be held back when you're on a continuous dosing of estrogen, when that process is either natural or you continue your hormones, so that the damage to the lining of the vessels is lessened. But when you aren't on hormones, that process then begins with full vigor. And if you restart hormones in the future, it actually increases the risk of a heart attack, which then explains why the 63-year-olds who had been off of hormones for a number of years ended up having more heart disease. So women tend to have less heart disease continuing the hormones, it appears, and that is the finding of this consensus group. In addition, they found that the experience of taking hormones reduced colon cancer. It was quite a significant percentage of women who had a less colon cancer risk than those who didn't go on hormone replacement. So yet another reason to consider.
Could this work for men as well?
You know, it doesn't seem to have the same effects, and there are, of course, side effects to estrogen and side effects to excess progesterones for men in the sense of growing breast buds and probably having deposition of fat in areas that aren't appropriate and other things that maybe don't help men. But there is a need for some estrogen in men, and we do produce some. It's just a very small amount, comparatively speaking.
Right. Okay.
So other things that they found in the recent consensus study is to look at the timing of hormone use and the amount of hormone use. So that really hasn't changed from the original WHI or Women's Health Initiative. The idea there is we use the least amount of drug, the least amount of hormone, estrogen and progesterone, that is required to solve the problems that we're seeking, primarily hot flashes. That's really the symptom that is most common, most prevalent, that women are most bothered by.
Right.
And getting a dose that is the least amount necessary to relieve those for the least amount of time that's required is what this consensus opinion came up with. There are still some within the groups that feel that hormone replacement throughout life may still have value in that same small dosing, but that is still a debated topic.
Would Suzanne Summers have an opinion on this?
You know, I'm glad you asked. Now, Suzanne Summers is one of the experts, of course, on hormone replacement, apparently, self-anointed or otherwise. But I think in some ways she's done a service to the process because it continues to bring up the question of hormone replacement, what is right. Her focus had been, and I think continues to be in many ways, bioidentical hormones.
Yeah, what is that?
So bioidentical hormones. Now, just like it sounds, the body makes hormones, and it's biology, and it's identical to the biology. So what the goal of a bioidentical hormone profile is to follow the levels that women are producing of estrogen and progesterone, what is actually flowing through their bloodstream or through saliva testing, and then using those to judge how much hormone to give them, and then giving them the hormones that are the same hormone that their body makes, the identical or bioidentical hormone. Now, that's an interesting concept. A couple of very important processes. Number one, this consensus opinion, one of the findings of that was that bioidentical hormones should not be used. That's a very significant statement for all of you out there who are going through the Wiley protocol and many of the other things that are being suggested by Suzanne Summers and others, all of whom are experts in the field, of course not trained.
According to them.
Correct. But the reality is there's not any evidence that suggests bioidentical hormones are better. There is some evidence that suggests they're worse. And what is that evidence? Well, the quality of the product is really the primary concern. It's not that there's anything wrong with bioidentical. We love bioidentical. In fact, most of the product that we produce in terms of the estrogen is estradiol. Estradiol is the strongest form of estrogen that the human body produces.
Right.
And that is what is in most, but not all, of the products that we actually produce that are FDA, Food and Drug Agency, I guess it is. Administration. There it is. Thank you, sir. FDA, excellent. There we go. They actually supervise the drugs that are made, and most of those are bioidentical. The progestins, and the progestin is a synthetic form of progesterone. That is not bioidentical in many of the forms that are produced. However, there are options that are FDA approved. One of them is called prometrium, or natural progesterone. It's called micronized progesterone. So in a sense, we have FDA bioidentical options that make sense. the reason not to support bioidentical in general is that you just don't know what you're getting. The FDA and others have looked at various what are called compounding pharmacies, which is where one typically gets these bioidentical hormones, and they've analyzed these products, and they find that the